This is the first week after it. We've been learning Shemini week after week, and today is a double portion. This week is a double portion, TAZRIA and METZORA, and I just want to flag two things as we start. The first is that theoretically, you would think that there isn't one word of these two Sedras that has anything to do with us. The Sedras are about being Tomei versus Tahoya. That means impure versus pure. We're going to talk about that a bit. And today it's all irrelevant because there's no Beis HaMikdash. So if there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Karbonis. If there's no Karbonis, there's no issue of Tomei and Tahoya, of purity and impurity, except in some areas where there are bodily functions that have nothing to do with the Beis HaMikdash. For example, childbirth, for example, a woman's menstrual cycle, which we'll come to in a minute. So the first question that if you've got any intellectual honesty at all, is to ask yourself, well, what are we learning all this for? I mean, we live in 2026, life's getting faster and faster. You don't know whether Trump's a goody or a lunatic. You don't, and we sit here and solemnly. You've got to understand the halachas of this are so difficult. We're going to be learning together tzoras, which means which is a kind of blemish, and it involves white skin and a white hair and a coloured hair and a different coloured skin and the pages and pages in Shulchan Aruch on this and for what? And people are bocky in this. They know this back to front. So the question is why? And does it have any relevance to us? Now, you don't have to be a genius that if you learn properly that Torah is nitzkis, it's eternal, it's given by Hashem to every Jew in every generation. It's relevant to every Jew in every generation. It's relevant to every Jew in every day of his life. I'll give you an example. We've just come out of Pesach. Pesach is the concept of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of escaping Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is translated as Egypt, but it's a silly translation. Mitzrayim comes from the word METZORA. METZORA means restriction, boundaries, being bound down. So Yetzias Mitzrayim means breaking out of boundaries. Now, this happened 3,500 years ago, but we have it in our Siddur for davening every day. Every day we have to remember the Yetzias Mitzrayim. So why is that? It's not a historical story that we're remembering. It would become a very tiresome story if that was the case. You'd know the facts of it in 5 minutes, and for the rest of your life you've got to repeat it every day in your davening. But what we need to understand is that a human being in general, and a Jew in particular, has a series of afflictions which make him enslaved, whether it's alcohol, whether it's women, whether it's power, whether it's money. There are areas in which one voluntarily becomes a slave. And Yetzias Mitzrayim is about a Jew's journey of shedding that enslavement, of breaking out of that bondage, and finding a true, rational, worthwhile purpose in his being alive. And that can't be to buy another Lamborghini. That cannot be the reason for one's existence. You don't have a digestive system and a blood supply and growth and hair and intelligence and emotions um, just to buy another watch. How can that make any sense? So just as Yetzias Mitzrayim is deeply personal and deeply meaningful, so too the whole learning on Tzoras and METZORA, which is what we're going to learn in a minute. It's deeply meaningful, very important, and understanding it really means coming to terms with your own psyche and your own development and your own needs and how those needs are satisfied. So let's just start with some basic stuff. The first, TAZRIA and METZORA are both all about being Tomei and Tahor, being impure and pure. We're going to define what that means in a minute. But the first part of it, most of it is about, there are two kinds of impurity. One is from inside, one is from outside. I'll give you an example. The outside are the easy ones. So for example, if you touch a dead animal and you are then impure until you rectify that situation. That has to do with waiting a certain period of time, going to the mikveh, no. But to do all of that, that's something that's happened to you from outside. You've touched an animal, and that's why you are not pure until nightfall. But the Sedra begins with, and what we're going to be focusing on, is a more important form of impurity, and that's from within. So, for example, let's take tzoras. There is a condition called tzoras, which is very badly translated into English as leprosy. It has nothing. I'm assured by many doctors that it has no connection with leprosy. First of all, leprosy is contagious, and tzoras is not contagious. But it's translated as leprosy. Forget that translation and think in terms of tzoras. Tzoras is a disease which is caused with a spiritual cause, mostly from Lashon Hara, mostly from speaking badly about another Jew behind his back or in front of him. Just very quickly, I just do the halachas of Lashon Hara very quickly for completeness. Lashon Hara is when you speak badly with words, gestures, about another person, and what you're saying is true. And it's a very serious, deleterious.
As a witness.
No, there are exceptions. If you're giving evidence, it's an exception. If you're giving a reference, that's an exception. If you're being asked in terms of a shidduch about somebody, that's an exception. But just to talk badly about somebody because it's enjoyable, and you've got to know the Gemara says that it's as sweet. It's as sweet as honey dripping. I think the wording is honey dripping from the fangs of a snake. That's how delicious it is. And if you're ever sitting around the table like we all do, you're at somebody's Shabbos table, and did you hear about Chaim Yankel? And no, and now everybody's leaning forward and they're rubbing their hands together, and this is why I came tonight. I'm really waiting to hear about Chaim Yankel. And when they do speak about Chaim Yankel like that, what happens is Chaim Yankel suffers. Actually, the speaker suffers, the listener suffers, and the subject suffers. And there's a whole lot of learning on why that is. We haven't got time for it, but I just want you to know that the disease of tzoras, one of its spiritual causes, one of the spiritual infections, is for speaking Lashon Hara. Then there are other forms of being spiritually impure. For example, childbirth. Let's take childbirth. Now, childbirth's a big mazel tov. If somebody has a child, that's a wonderful thing. That's a cause for celebration. However, the mother, on giving birth to a male, is impure for 7 days. If she gives birth to a male, for 14 days. Now, why is she twice as dirty? Let's use the wrong word for a minute, for a male or for a female, because if she gives birth to a male, and she's tome for 7 days, why? Because it's one male. And we'll come back to what tome means in a minute. Whereas for a girl, she can have many more offspring, and you'll see that that's a multiplier of what we're talking about. Actually, let's deal with that right away. What does it mean to be impure? Let's clarify this. It has nothing to do with cleanliness. You got to know this. And you know, when you talk to ignorant people, most Jews are ignorant. It's not a criticism. It's a tragedy. We'll see that. I'll tell you something the Rebbe said at the end of the shir. But it's a tragedy. But most people haven't got a clue what any of this is about, and they mistranslate the word as being dirty. Now, it's got nothing to do with dirty. And when a woman finishes being impure, she goes to the mikveh and immerses from the mikveh. It comes out from the mikveh, and the mikveh can be filthy. Do you understand this? The water can be filthy. It's not pleasant. We try not to subject women to that, but women try not to subject themselves to it. But you can come out of a mikveh which is filthy and be made pure. On the other hand, you can go into a perfectly beautiful, luxurious shower with 3 shower things and hot water and scrubbing brushes and do whatever you want to cleanse yourself in the shower, and you can come out smelling beautiful and put on rose perfume and all that, and you're still tome, you're still impure. It has nothing to do with cleanliness. Let's get that clear. So what is it? What is it? So we Jews have a deep, fundamental connection to the notion that Hashem is purity, and where there is a lack of Hashem, there is impurity. What is Hashem? How is Hashem manifested? He's manifested in life. The fact that creatures have a nefesh and human beings have a neshama and are alive, that is a walking, talking testament to godliness. When that godliness is available, you have purity. When that godliness is not available, you have impurity. So, when a woman gives birth, let's go back to that example, her body has lost another living life. The living life's alive, that's great, and it's pure. Why? Because it's alive. But she has lost the child, or given birth to the child. Her body has lost a living soul, and therefore, to that extent, she is impure for a period of time until that's rectified. It's not a criticism, it's not an ugliness, it's not a dirtiness, it's just a testimony to the fact that there is a missing of life.
Stillbirth? Spiritual.
Yeah, whatever. It's of course. But please, let's. So, but of course you're right. If it's a stillbirth, then it was alive and now it's dead, and once it's dead, she becomes impure. So the issue of purity or not purity is much more concerned with. Is not concerned with dirt or lack of cleanliness. It's to do with manifest godliness. And when that manifest godliness isn't available, then you have impurity. And then there's a procedure to how to fix that. Now, there are Kabbalists understand that there are ways to tune into one's purity and ways to, and I'll give you an open example that all of us can understand without being a Kabbalist. In Perek Beis of Tanya, chapter 2 of Tanya, it says something that may astonish you if you haven't learned this inside, that the mindset of a couple having sexual intercourse, the mindset influences the neshama that comes down into the guf. Assuming that there's a birth as a result of it, the mindset of the parents during intercourse influences the soul in the body. And if the mindset is more pure, then the offspring will be more spiritually delicate. Do I understand this? I'm repeating to you what it says in Tanya, and I'm just trying to explain that there is a concept of purity which has nothing to do with cleanliness, but has to do with evidence of life. Okay. Now, how do you know when someone is pure or impure? That is something that needs to be pronounced by a Kohen. So let me give you an example from an outside influence of impurity. You touch a dead animal. You like rabbits. You pick up a dead rabbit thinking it's alive and you want to cuddle it. It's really sweet. It seems to still be twitching. So you pick it up to soothe it and you pat it and it dies in your arms. Now, from that moment, you are tome. You are impure. And if you take that animal into the house, the whole house is tome. The whole house is impure. Now, when does the house become impure? Not when you walk in with the rabbit. It becomes impure when a Kohen pronounces that it is impure. So, and if it's impure, you and everybody else has to get out of the house, because if you're in it, you become impure. So let's try and understand this. What happens if you have a specialist in purity? He's a bocher. He's one of my grandsons. He goes to yeshiva, and he specializes in this business of tahor and tomei. It's part of the course to become a rabbi. So he decides to specialize, and he becomes a real expert. He really gets to it. He understands the difference in shade of color, when the tsaras is on the skin, or when it's the hair is white or grey, and whether it goes in the middle of the thing or whether it goes from the outside of the thing. He becomes a specialist in this. He really gets it, right? But he's not a Kohen. And so he can't pronounce somebody Tomei. Now, what about a Kohen who understands nothing about this? A Kohen, he's just a Kohen, and he's not hardly ever even heard of it. And so what he needs to then do is he calls him an expert, and the expert comes and advises him and says, this guy's Tomei, this is impure. And until the Kohen says he's impure, he's not impure. Yeah. So you're allowed to be in the house. Your kids can be in the house. Nobody's going to be Tomei. This is also that you could eat from the korbanos in the days of the Beis HaMikdash. We're going to come to what this got to do with you and me in a minute. But so the Kohen, once he pronounces a Tomei, it is Tomei. If he doesn't pronounce it Tomei, no matter how the halacha is satisfied, he is not Tomei. Okay, everybody has to understands that because we can't move until we do. Okay. Now, before we go on, let me reveal the code to you because we're going to be understanding this in terms of modern life. A kohen is an ish chesed. A kohen is a kohen is a manifestation and a symbol of kindness. Kohanim are, there's some studies on this in physicality, I haven't got time for it, but there is some scientific evidence that this is also demonstrably provable. But leaving that aside, we learn as a matter of Torah that a kohen is an ish chesed, he's kind. And when we're talking about a kohen needing to be the one who pronounces somebody tomei, impure, it has to, for you and me, for this to be relevant, we have to understand that we're talking about the following paradigm, that you are putting somebody down. Impurity is a lower form of existence of purity. And in order to put somebody down, you have to be functioning in your Kohen mode. You have to, there are three levels of Am Yisrael, everybody knows. There's Kohanim, Levim, and Yisrael. We all, although somebody is a Kohen, somebody is a Levi, Kremnizer is a Levi, right? So, although that's true, in each Jew, there are all three levels. And when it's talking about a Kohen needing to pronounce somebody tomei, impure, it has to be out of kindness. It can't be out of criticism. So that we are suddenly learning something completely relevant, that this is true right now, today, that you are going to be called upon, or you're going to volunteer criticism. And now there is a fascinating series of investigations that and most people never think of this. They don't learn Hasidus. It's a tragedy. Kids should learn this in school, right? But when you're going to criticize a fellow Jew, the first question that you've got to ask yourself is, where is the criticism coming from? Is it coming from my Kohen, or is it coming from my Levi or my Yisrael? And most of the time, if you have any level of honesty when you look in the mirror, not to shave but to style your beard or whatever it is that you do, the first question you need to answer is that question, where's this coming from? So let's take some examples. You have I've been in shul, and on Shabbos in Tzemach Tzedek, and there was a young kid came, and he's starting his journey, and knew nothing, right? I mean, most of the guys in Tzemach know nothing, but that's not a criticism. That's also a reality. We live in 2026. It's busy. Who's got time to learn all day like Jews used to? So you do the best you can with what you can, and how much can you know in 24 in that period of time that you've got to remember that people of the Mishnah got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and learned until 12 o'clock at night. No interruptions. So the level of learning is a bit different than a young guy who's trying to struggle to buy his shares and invest in property and pay his mortgage and do all that. And he comes to and it's great that he comes to Tzemach Tzedek at all, but he's not going to know much. So I'm a witness to the following situation. This young kid, he must be 19, 20. It was Shabbos morning, and bless him. And we used to have an urn in the back, in the old kitchen before you made it into an acceptable, beautiful place. It was a big Shabbos urn, and for those guys who wanted a coffee, now to have a coffee, you have to use a klisheni. And you know why you use a klisheni? You use a klisheni because you're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. So if you use a klisheni and you pour it from one to another, the Alter Rebbe paskins that is not cooking, that because the water is cooled off. Now that doesn't apply, by the way, to cooked food. Cooked food you don't have to use a klisheni. So I've been present when somebody asked Rabbi Perlov, well, what about coffee? Instant coffee's cooked. So why do we have to use a klisheni when you use... I've gone off the track, but in case it's of interest to you. So Rabbi Perlov explained to him that it's not cooked, it's roasted. And roasting is not enough of a cooking to qualify for a klisheni. I've wasted 5 minutes of your time. This boy went into the kitchen on Shabbos, and I happened to be in the kitchen I think I was getting a l'chaim in those days. I was able to say l'chaim, and he was in there, and a die-hard member of the shul, not a Lubavitcher, I'm proud to say, walked in, and this kid is lifting the top of the urn and pouring fresh water into the urn, right? Which anyone who keeps any level of Shabbos is shocked because that's cooking. That's everything. You can't do anything worse with an urn and water. And he sees him doing this and he says, "What the F are you doing?" So this kid says, "We're running out of water." and he said, "You're a donkey. Get out of here." Right? That's how he spoke to him. And he felt much better, the guy who called him a donkey, because he knows the laws of Shabbos. He knows Hilchos Shabbos, and he knows that couldn't happen to him, and this guy is a donkey compared to him. Now that's treif. That's criticism from the very worst place. That's criticism from a person's yeshus. Everyone know what yeshus? We've been through this many times. Yeshus means the perverse need to prioritize you and your greatness over your neighbor and his ordinariness. That's what yeshus means. People it's got all lots of offshoots: conceit, arrogance. Rabbi Leder tells this thing that there was a rabbi in a very learned shul, and everybody was very, very yeshustik, very arrogant. And so one day for Shabbos he said, "At this minyan, I want Shlishi to go to the most humble man in the room." Who's the most humble man in the room? I'm the most humble. I'm the most humble. I'm the most humble.
The most humble at the table.
That's right, the most humble. So that kind of humility we are not interested in. That is yeshus. Yeshus is a spiritual enemy to progress. And the problem with yeshus is that it's designed to make the person perpetrating his yeshus on other people, it's designed to make him feel better. So people criticize to elevate themselves. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about a kohen pronouncing somebody tomei. That means he is criticizing because he's saying that the person's impure, but that criticism has to come from a place of kindness. I'll give you another example. We just come out of Pesach. You know, there was in the late 40s, the Frierdiker Rebbe used to have Seder upstairs in 770. Don't know how many people here have been to 770, but you go upstairs, the there's the Frierdiker Rebbe's room, and next to it is the shul, little shul, and and he used to have Seder upstairs there, and it was with his family. And Rabbi Feldman told me that when he was a little boy, he's 1 year younger than me. He said that when he was a little boy, he remembers the Shabbos Mevarchim Farbrengens in 770 with less people than we get to a Kiddush. Can you believe that? The old Hasidim from Europe who knew everything, there was less of them than we have at a Kiddush. So it was just the Frierdiker Rebbe's family, his Rebbetzin and his 2 daughters and 2 sons-in-law and whatever other guest or 2 there might have been. And on at this particular Seder, and this is a well-known story in Chabad, right? At this particular Seder, there was somebody there who was very makmir, very particular in the laws of kashrus for Pesach. And Chabad is very particular not to have gebroks. Does everyone know what I'm talking about? You're not allowed to wet the matzah, because the matzah theoretically can just. We don't eat gebroks until the last day, Achron Shel Pesach, where we're particular to do it. Anyway, it's a big sin in Chabad. It's a bit awkward when your kids marry out. In other words, marry from people. I mean, 2 of my sons-in-law came first night and said, "Where's the matzah balls?" So it depends on your minhag. My parents, if they ever went to a Seder or ever had a Seder, I'm sure they would have had matzah balls. My mother would have been very particular about that. So he's at the Seder, and there's this Polish guy, very frum, Chabad, and all of a sudden, and there was a guest, and the Rebbetzin had served borscht. You know what that is? Yeah. So rhubarb soup. So she serves the borscht, and this guy, the visitor, takes some of the matzah. This is already in Shulchan Aruch. They've already finished the Seder and they're eating now, right? So he dips it in the borscht. And one of the guys at the table goes mad. This is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Gebroks, goy vey, and he goes crazy, right? And then they all turn to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe's looking at the guest warmly. And he says to the guest, much better is pink matzah than a red face. You understand this? It's got to come from Chesed. Yeah. If it doesn't come from Chesed, it's treif. We not only don't we believe in it, we are appalled by it. And this kind of superiority, it's all yeshus, that's all it is. And it's treif shebetreif. So that's why we learn that only a kohen can paskin on whether somebody is tomei or not, can rule on whether somebody is impure or not because we need a kohen to do the ruling today. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash today, so we don't have this halakha relevant at a practical level, but it's very relevant, as is all Torah, at a spiritual level. And at a spiritual level, the lesson that you are supposed to be trying to understand, or we are trying to understand, is when it is that you can talk badly to your fellow Jew and it's kosher, or when it's treif. Let's talk about the kosher side of it. We have Gemaras that say that if you see a Jew doing something wrong, you got to correct him. It's a mitzvah to correct him. How do you do that? How do you correct the person who is filling up that urn that day, right? You're not allowed to just keep stum and let him leave, not knowing that he's broken Shabbos. You have somehow or other got to tell him what the halakha is, which involves a criticism, but do it from love, not from arrogance. And he needs to benefit from that. How? By learning something that what he did was wrong. So the Gemara asks a fantastic question. It says, and if you know that the person you're going to criticize is not going to listen to you, is not going to be convinced, can you criticize him? What's the answer? No. You can't. If it's not going to benefit him, if he's not going to grow from the experience, you have no right to criticize.
You can inform him.
Exactly. If the information has to be such that he grows, not that he gets resentful or ashamed or embarrassed or wants revenge against you. If you create a situation where there's revenge against you, there's a whole lot of learning on this as well. We haven't got time for it tonight, but both parties are at fault there because you've created the need for the other person to have revenge. Why does that situation exist? You've already done something wrong to your fellow Jew. And this is all part of the amazingly important and detailed area of Ahavas Yisrael. And we don't live like this. The average person doesn't live focused on Ahavas Yisrael. He doesn't, if a guy, you're driving down Manning Road, Double Bay, and some dopey woman drives out on the wrong side and nearly smashes your car and you just avoid it, you don't feel sorry for that woman. You feel like beating the hell out of her.
Yeah.
And that's no good because she's another Yid and she was probably thinking about something important for her. And if you were in her shoes, you'd... So let's talk about this. This is another aspect of Ahavas Yisrael, and it's another aspect of what we're talking about here. We have a mitzvah, we have a requirement that we have to don lekafskus. You know what that means? You have to judge favorably. Okay? So what does that mean? Let's say you see James Trelawney, who says he's a Jew, driving down Victoria Road in his open Bentley on Shabbos. Are you supposed? What is done lekafskus? Are you supposed to say, well, really, he's not really breaking Shabbos. He's really probably sick, or he's probably got to go to hospital, or there's some reason, and that's not what it means. There's no requirement for you to be an idiot. There's no requirement for you to be a fool, right? If you see Rabbi Philman driving on Shabbos, then you've seriously got to consider how's that possible, right? And then you've got to don lekafskus. You've got to then judge according favorably. So maybe his wife's sick, God forbid, or maybe he's got his reason. He's not driving down Victoria Road in his open sports car just because because he doesn't care about Shabbos, right? So that is something that you've got to do. But deeper than that, the mitzvah to judge according to judge favorably is like this: that when a guy does something to you which is negative, and the knee-jerk reaction is to say, what a selfish bastard, or the guy's a narcissist, or he's a this, or he's a that. And he might be all of those things. But you have to spare a thought that if you were born in his family, with his siblings, and his abusive parents, and the school that he went to, and the amount of money he was deprived and robbed of, and you would be worse. You could be worse. That's what it means, don lekafskus. That before you're quick to judge, you have to consider whether, if you had been in the same position, and the nations of the world have borrowed from us with this. There's a Chinese saying that something about walking up hundreds. I've forgotten what the saying is. But our learning is that if somebody does something negative, you're not required to be an idiot and say he's not doing something negative. But you are required to consider that if you had his background, his education, his opportunities, his financial position, his wife, never, with some people.
Try first.
So, his divorce, then you maybe would do much worse. So that's what Don Lekavskus means. So, and again, this is, you are accessing your level of kohen, and you are pronouncing that person tahor. You're pronouncing that person pure when a minute ago you were convinced that he was impure. And it's an act that requires concentrated effort. This business of Ahavas Yisrael is very difficult, and it's very I'll tell you how difficult it is. The mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael isn't given to you for people you like. Just consider that for a minute. The mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael isn't given to us because we like. I happen to like this guy, right? We do business together. He comes to me. I like the guy. He should wear a suit when he comes to see me, but he doesn't. But the fact that that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is for the guy who you don't like and who takes your space and robs you of your space and lies and cheats. Now, he's the guy the mitzvah applies to. Is it difficult? In my opinion, it's the most difficult mitzvah in the Torah. Who says that's right? It depends on where you stand. I know I've got a son-in-law. Everybody loves him. Right? Everybody loves him, and it comes to him completely naturally. He loves everybody else. I've never heard him say he didn't like somebody. It's a gift from God. Me? For me, the mitzvah is a mitzvah. It requires work and effort. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Because it's a mitzvah, it's a foregone conclusion that of course you can do it. And if you're not doing it, you're failing. Now, can you tell somebody else that they're failing if they're not doing it? It depends. Are you saying it from your kohen level, or are you saying it because you want to put him down and you want to feel superior? And you want to feel superior that you wouldn't fill the urn with the water? You know, I had a teacher, he's dead now, he was bringing once in Melbourne. I'll never forget this. I repeat this often. You know, he said that he won't daven in a shul where there aren't people that break their teeth over the Kaddish. He wants to daven in. If otherwise, it's a boys' club. If you're sitting with your friends and they all know how to daven and they all know how to lane and they all know how to do everything, and it's lovely. You're with your friends and that's beautiful. But that's not a Chabad shul. Chabad shul needs guys who don't know about the water and guys who don't know how to say Kaddish and break their teeth on it sincerely, trying to say the Kaddish. That's a Chabad shul. Somebody's brought that person there as a kohen to pronounce him tahor. Anyway, l'chaim.
What, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Finish?
No,
Not yet.
I've got a lot to
sorry.
go. Okay, so
Let's do it again. What? Oh, empty.
Shall сейчас свой телефон. Да.
I have a question.
Бэмби, она.
okay. Now I'm going to tell you something amazing. So, the sign of being Tomei is a white spot on the skin. And it's accompanied by various other signals with white hair and this and that. And if you have many sins, you will have many of these blotches. What happens, asks the Torah, if you're all white? There's no pink skin left. It's all white. You know what? Then you're pure.
Yeah.
Why? So this is a very deep aspect of what we've been talking about. You know, let's take an example. We're all parents, grandparents, one level or another. You have a child, and the child is, you've got 4 children that are doing exactly what you want, and they're going to school and doing their homework, and they're honest, and you've got one kid who is just absolutely contrary to everything. He doesn't want to learn. He doesn't want to go to school. He doesn't want to respect his parents. He's rude. He cheats. He lies. He steals. He's from morning to night nothing but a problem. God forbid that anyone should have one of these kids. But people have kids. Before I tell you this, I'm going to tell you, go on a quick detour and tell you a story from the Rebbe. There's a story from the Rebbe. It's got a couple of versions. The version I heard and the version I believe was that the Rebbe, because Rabbi Feldman told me this, that the Rebbe stepped out of the lift in 770 and standing around with 3 Bochrim. Now, these were already aged Bochrim who knew how to learn and everything. And the Rebbe didn't like seeing people standing around inactive. You know, you either be learning or helping someone. So the Rebbe got out of the lift and the Rebbe said, would you like to hear something hot off the press from the Rebbe, from the Shver, his father-in-law, the Friediger Rebbe, right? Yeah, they said, yes, they'd love to hear. So he said, well, I collect the checks. You know, in those days, like I told you, there were so few people there, but there were still people from Europe who even though they threw their tefillin over the side of the ship, they knew what a Rebbe was from there, and they knew that the Friediger Rebbe was a Friediger, and they knew that they were poor, and they came and they used to leave tzedakah at the front desk at 770. And some of the people and the Rebbe's job was to collect that tzedakah and use it for the various things that he was using it for. And he came under criticism from some of the fellas. Why? Because he was taking money from people who weren't showing Shabbos anymore, who weren't kosher anymore. And why doesn't he understand that gives a tacit approval to these people? They think that they can buy their way out of the fact that they're not. So that troubled the Rebbe, because the Rebbe was very nice to these people when he took the money from them. The Rebbe was very nice to everybody always. So he went up and he said, I went and asked the Charlotte to the Shver, to my father-in-law. So what he asked his father-in-law, and he said, would you like to know what my father-in-law said? So the 3 guys said, yeah, they'd like to know. So he said, the Rebbe's told me this. He said, it's one of the ununderstood miracles that when a couple have a child, they love that child with all their heart. They love the child. They have no more love to give. When they have a second child, suddenly they have more love to give. Where did that love come from? Then they have a third child, they have again more love to give. Says, but what if they have a 4th child, and the 4th child is backward, never, or doesn't have an arm, or doesn't have feet, or is blind, or is deaf? Does the parent love that child less or more? On the contrary, that loves it more. And not only does it love it more, but they find in their heart a level of extra love which they didn't even believe would happen if the child was normal. So he said, the Rebbe is saying what his father-in-law said. When I see, says the father-in-law, a Jew whose arm is in trouble because he doesn't put tefillin on, or whose feet are in trouble because he doesn't walk to shul Shabbos, or he's deaf because he doesn't say Shema, but whatever it is. And he went through a whole lot of defects. He said, we have to love him more. We have to love him more because he doesn't have access to these mitzvahs. So that's what the Rebbe told him, right? So I'm telling you that because why? Because what we're learning is all aspects of Avos Yisrael. That the guys who were telling the Rebbe not to that they shouldn't take their tzedakah because it's in some way validating their bad behavior. We don't think like that's not thinking it with your Kohen level. That's thinking with your Yisrael level or your Levi level. Now, back to this business of the white spot and when the whole person's white. So let's go back to the example of the fourth child, instead of being sick, is naughty, badly behaved, doesn't keep any of the rules, doesn't do, or you give a class, and in that class there's a kid who is just disrupting the class from morning till night. He comes to school, he's not worth 1 minute of his time. So the Rebbe asked this question. He says, is there any point in disciplining that child? That child, there's no point in disciplining him because the more you discipline him, the worse he's going to be. So what is the only way to deal with that child? Love him. You just got to love that child. You just got to love him and find a pathway to loving that child and having that child that will ignite the child's love, and slowly but surely you can make some headway. You've got to be very patient. You've got to deal with the kohen in you and not your ordinary day job. But that's the only key to saving that child. Now, the Rebbe pronounced the post-Holocaust generation as Kule, all white. Jews have forgotten how to be Jews after the war. They endured the most terrible torture, the most terrible shame, they had so little self-esteem, and so they were so crushed and so beaten and so without any individual resource. And yet they fought their way back in many, many ways. But in terms of their frumkeit, many of them gave it all away. They were all white. It wasn't one spot. It was the whole, and he pronounced the whole generation, Tomei, but Kule, all white, all that, like with the body and so instead of criticizing them, and instead of shouting at people because they didn't put on tefillin, or they didn't keep kashrus, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that, the Rebbe sent Shluchim to love them out of it, to love them into learning how to be Jews again. And he's, to a large extent, his army of Shluchim have done an unbelievable job. There are some exceptions. There are some people who shouldn't be Shluchim. You know, I know a Shliach who I met 50 years ago, and he didn't behave like a Shliach. And the Rebbe told him to go into business. He went to bed for a week, this man. He was so depressed. But the Rebbe told him in simple language. You're not a shliach, you're a businessman. Go into business. Don't lie. Don't lie to yourself. Don't poison other people. Go into business and make a fortune and give tzedakah. That's where you belong. So, in short, the laws of purity and impurity, God forbid that anybody should imagine that they are an ancient bit of nonsense that we don't have to keep anymore because we don't have a temple. God forbid. It's a critical part of one's consciousness and one's perspective, and the perspective is basically one where, as always in Yiddishkeit, the other person comes first in your relationship. That's often very difficult. But, it's a fascinating thing that that Am Yisrael have been learning from the Gemara and from the Midrash for 3,500 years, that the way to happiness is to make someone else happy. And modern society are teaching our children and our grandchildren, who are so entitled, you can't believe it, that the way to happiness is their self-fulfillment. What's their self-fulfillment? Gratification. The more gratification they can seize, the better a life they have. That is a myth. That is a current mad myth. We don't believe in any of that. We don't believe that for a minute. In fact, the happiest people on the planet are those people who spend their life giving. That's the reality. Okay, guys.
Tomorrow never comes.